P01 Omega.
And those two.
And those two.
Each goes to different
Okay.
and different times.
Hello.
You are.
Time's on.
And this is the hardest plate. Right there.
Damn it.
Now, how do you tell?
Double action. Double action. Gotta work on that double. P01 non-Omega. Hey guys, welcome back to 1776 or Bust. So on the table you see my CZ P01. And, you know, for those of you who have followed my channel, this was actually the first handgun that I ever bought as a first-time gun owner. And, you know, eventually I wound up selling that first gun foolishly because I really wanted to move away from the, you know, the hammer-fired handguns and move to the more modern striker-fired handguns. And when I sold it, I instantly regretted it. And eventually I was reunited with this handgun, even though I was initially looking for what I called at the time P01 Omega, which was a unicorn, at least in my neck of the woods. Now, in regards to this, the big question of this video is, do you really actually need an Omega? And I think there is some overall confusion in regards to what actually is an Omega in regards to a P01. Now, keep in mind, the first P01 Omega looked exactly like this. The only difference that you would find was that on the slide, if I can zoom in there, you'd see P02, and then you'd have an Omega symbol right here. And what that indicated was that the internals had changed a little bit. In other words, the internal parts were made slightly easier to be able to strip and then you know, I guess you can say strip it down completely, disassemble it, and then reassemble it back together again without major issues. So that's where that Omega system came from. Now, the original P02 Omega actually had the curved trigger just like you see right here. And again, the only real difference was the internal parts were made slightly easier to assemble and disassemble if you wanted to do that. On top of that, the parts internally were also made of slightly better corrosion-resistant, durable materials. So over time, you know, you wouldn't have necessarily any breakages or any of that sort of thing with your equipment inside of the handgun. Now, CZ eventually changed the Omega system slightly by changing out the trigger, and in some guns, the hammer as well. Now, the trigger over time, what you will find is that the trigger, instead of being this curved trigger, they flattened the trigger. I don't want to say it's completely straight because it's not. It's sort of angled with a slight hook at the bottom, but obviously not as drastic as what you see right here. So for those of you out there debating whether or not you want to get a P01 or a P01 Omega, like this one right here, you'd have to really ask yourself, does it really matter? Now, some people will sit there and say to you, no, the P01 Omega is hands down a better handgun. It feels better, it shoots better. And to be honest with you, this gun has about 500 rounds through it, and I absolutely love it. I got a couple of little nicks here, which kind of sucks, but whatever, it's a gun. And this one has roughly about 350 rounds through it, and both of them are fairly stock. The only thing I've changed on this one are the sights. And in both, I've actually added the $18 spring kit from Cajun Gunworks. And it's a quick, easy thing, couple of springs, good to go, reduces the double action pull, and sort of reduces that single action pull, even though that single action out of the box is an excellent single action in my opinion. Now, there's going to be some people who will argue that this trigger feels just a lot smoother in regards to its operation and that the reset is slightly better on this. One of the things I would tell you that I noticed about the Omega system or the Omega versions of these guns is a simple fact that it feels a little bit spongier compared to the original. Now, again, could it be just me? Maybe. It's definitely possible. However, I think it has something to do with just the internal parts, being that they're easier to break down as opposed to this. I think that may have something to do with it. Again, I'm not an expert. I'm just giving you what my opinion is. Now, obviously, you can see the trigger shape is slightly different. Now, some people will say it's a flat trigger. It's really not a flat trigger. And you can see that if it was flat, it would be, well, flat. This one is slightly curved. So some people will say it just gives me a better pull on the trigger, and that might be true. You know, I've had some experience with the flat face triggers, and I actually love them. I think they're great, and I do think they give you a more reasonable trigger pull and a little bit more control over the trigger. Now, of course, being an original owner of this P01 and then getting another one like you see right here, I do like the actual curved trigger. You know, it just feels like my pad fits really well inside the gun, and I don't really have any major complaints about it. You know, it shoots well. It shoots as well as I do. So in regards to that, it's okay. It's not significantly better or worse than this one here. And again, the other thing that you want to consider is when you see this P01, they do call this the P01 Omega convertible. And again, what does that really mean? Well, in the original P01 series, you have your decocker, but you can't switch this out for a safety. It's decocker only. In regards to the Omega series that are convertibles, what you see here is your decocker, but it also comes with a safety, so if you do want to carry this cocked and locked, you can. So again, you know, is that such a major significant difference between the two? I guess it's going to depend on the buyer. You know, and I think that's really the interesting part of this conversation is that a lot of times we get so hyped up about, you know, something with a catchy phrase, because let's be honest, you hear CZ P01 and you're like, oh, that's a great gun. But then all of a sudden you hear P01 Omega, and all of a sudden you're like, my God, I got to have an Omega because it's just so much better. And really, in my opinion, this is a fantastic gun, but is it any better than this one? I would say it's not. You know, as a matter of fact, in my opinion, it's just as good as this one right here. And again, you can see this is my PCR. It's the old system, same decocker as the old P01. Again, has the $18 spring kit in this one as well. And I'll be honest with you guys, this one feels a little heavier on a trigger pull than either one of these, but this hasn't even been shot yet. These two have several hundred rounds through them. And again, when you start shooting them, they're going to smooth up even more, or smoothen up even more. I guess, I don't know, maybe. So, I mean, overall, you know, what's the deal with this? I think a lot of times, like I said, you get caught up or wrapped up in this idea that you have to have the Omega system. Now, the Omega system, again, has nothing to do with the trigger, guys. It just has to do with the, I guess you can call them interchangeable parts inside, and that's it. So, you know, if you have a P07 duty, is there anything wrong with that gun compared to the new P07? Well, there are some different changes, especially in the polymer. But other than that, it's relatively the same gun. Obviously, they tweaked some of the cosmetic things and obviously the finishes on the slides. But overall, I mean, are you really getting more with the Omega than with the regular one? And honestly, guys, in my opinion, you're not. I mean, if you can find a P01, pick it up. It's a fantastic gun, and you won't regret it. If you can find a P01 Omega, pick that one up also, because it's a fantastic gun, and you won't regret it. Now, of course, if I had to choose between either or, that's very difficult for me to do because I just absolutely love these lines of CZs. If I had to choose any of my favorite CZs that have ever been made, it's definitely their compact, alloyed framed handguns. To me, they're just the best that CZ has ever made. I know some people are going to get pissed because I didn't say the Shadow 2, but it's just, to me, these are the best. And if I ran into a store and I saw any of the three on this table, I'd buy one of them. I don't care if it's an Omega. I don't care if it's the original trigger with the curved hook to it, because they're both going to perform excellently, or all three of them are going to perform excellently. They're going to both be, or all three of them are going to be fantastic for the price that you're going to pay for them. And honestly, overall, get this one because it costs a little bit less and you're going to get just as good a gun. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. I'd love to know if you believe that whole business about the Omega being better. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it really deals with just kind of saying, hey, look at me, I have an Omega, even though technically it may not be as, advanced as, let's say, one of these two other choices right here. So let me know. Tell me what you think down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say as always. Again, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. We're close to that 5,000 mark, which would be pretty sweet to hit. And again, I hope you guys have a great night. Stay safe. And as always, freedom is never free.